Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Awake in the World. We are live right now. It is 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you are here on Earth, the 12th of March in the year 2021, forming a healing daily practice. Hello, hello, hello. So Kelly's about a minute away from 2 super fresh loaves. Well, they better be. They're just coming out of the oven of sourdough. And it was like a 50-year-old sourdough starter that a friend of ours' grandmother started. And it's just been kept going for like 50 years. And it is an amazing sourdough. So yummy. Yeah. So, what are we going to talk about tonight? This evening, we're going to talk about trauma and we're going to talk about developing a daily healing practice and what that means and some of the things that you can do. But before we do that, oh, there's the buzzer. So, the bread's coming out. I wish we had smell-o-vision. You remember way back in the day, I think it was in the late 60s or maybe it was the 70s, we were talking about smell-o-vision, where they were supposed to get to the point where we could sense, have a scent of things that were going on in the TV. And, there's a lot of reasons why that was a really bad idea. But this is one of those times where, man, let me tell you, if I could share with you the scent of fresh sourdough that permeates this entire house, just fresh out of the oven, it's just wow, yum. I'm drooling. My mouth's watering so much. So, and the other thing is of course, I do want to share a little something with you, and I came up with this today. I thought it was rather funny. So, we all know what this is, right? And we all know what that is. And we know what that one is too. And we know what that one is. So what is it I'm doing? Well, I'm contemplating change. Another advantage of the screen. You can't slap me from where you're standing. I'm safe. Nah, 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 nah. Okay, so let's get right into this tonight. Humor's over. Yeah, right, sure, whatever. First of all, as always, I love each and every one of you. You are truly part of me and I am part of you, and we are all part of this magnificent one. We just like to think we're separate, individuated beings. And that in some way makes us feel special. And in truth, each one of us is a unique, one of a kind, never to be seen before, never to be seen again, one time only, one show only manifestation of that creator. So you are special. And every other manifestation of that creator is also special, unique, purposeful. Whether you sense it or see it or not, it's there. Tonight we're going to talk about trauma, and we're going to talk about forming a daily healing practice and what you can honestly do about trauma. Now, let's be crystal clear. There are only two types of trauma. There is trauma that occurs to the physical manifestation, the energetic body field that we would call the body. Physical trauma. That is the first source of trauma. The second and the only other source of trauma is trauma generated by the mind. I know that's going to be hard for you to accept, but it's the truth. You can't actually be traumatized by something outside of you when it comes to the mental machinations of and what we do with the egoic self. All that trauma is actually fully created, manifested, and has to be dealt with by the mind. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Now, a lot of people may argue, well, some are a mixture of the two, and no, they're not. Trauma of the body is trauma of the body. Physical trauma is physical trauma. If there is a mental trauma involved, a trauma created in the act of that physical trauma, it is through the mind's interpretation of what has just occurred in physical trauma. So stop arguing about it. We need to dissect, though, these two traumas very carefully so we understand the difference. Because you can't deal with both of them in the same way. You just can't. So here's the deal with physical trauma. If the physical trauma has been long-term or severe enough to the body, and we're not talking about what you think about it, we're talking about what the very cells of your body think about it. And you have no conscious clue about what that is. But you're going to know if they are all thinking that. So this sort of physical trauma, when it occurs, when there's a large enough shock to the nervous system, a high impact collision will do it. The idea of fibromyalgia comes up with this, but we're going to leave those terms alone, and we're going to stick to just the overlying condition. And that is trauma that that the very cells, the very energetic structure of the being, those cells are holding that traumatic memory. They've literally encoded the experience within the energetic field of the body, outside of the mind. The mind has no awareness of it whatsoever. But the body's energetic field sure as hell knows. Now, this trauma can manifest itself and we have to be very clear about understanding the difference here, because there is a line, and even though the line may appear to be blurred at sometimes, the line is still there. The physical manifestations of physical trauma are all that there is. There isn't any other manifestation of physical trauma except physical manifestations. The mind can sure play another trauma game on top of that, but it is a separate trauma and has to be dealt with separately. So let's look at case number 1. Garen, dumb as he is, freestyle rock climbing, falls 450 feet down the side of a cliff and bounces off the granite rocks below and somehow lives. The trauma to the body, the trauma that Garen takes on in that event, is held deep within the cellular memory. Every single cell, all 70 some odd trillion of them, remember that event. Now, Garen at the egoic level may remember some of the event as well. But, Garen's a pretty laid-back sort of guy, so he's not holding anything mental about it at all. As a matter of fact, he's climbing again. He hasn't thought about that thing twice. But despite the fact that the doctors report that, his body is doing okay, Garen is experiencing various physical symptoms that seem to come and go without reason. Various issues begin to crop up that even though they may be related in some way to the original trauma, like you could say, well, it would be obvious that your back should be hurting a little bit, or that you knocked your brains out of your head. No, because then I'd be speaking in French. And I can say that because I'm half French. So, if Garen is doing okay mentally with it, in other words, he's not participating in creating mental trauma, but he's still experiencing all sorts of physical side effects. And despite the amount of treatment, despite going to see doctors everywhere else, it's still there. It's stuck. How does one get rid of that when at the mind level, you're doing fine? Well, as I said earlier on, what we're talking about with physical trauma that goes on long term or is particularly harsh or is particularly jarring, high impact, absorbs the full brunt of your attention in the act of it happening. That cellular memory, which is connected to the nervous system, anytime that anything around the body mimics any aspect of that experience, that entire nervous system and all the cellular data involved in that system and every cell in the body is going to react. And at the mental level, Garen's going to be blissfully unaware of that, but he's going to sure as hell notice a reaction. He's going to double over in pain, or his shoulder will start to ache like all get out, or his skin will become inflamed and he'll break out in hives. It doesn't really matter what it is. That trauma is seething within the energetic field of the body, and it's being held there. Now, how do you get rid of something that you can't really connect to? Because remember, Garen's totally okay with the trauma as far as his mental aspect goes. He doesn't think about it at all. He has a good laugh, as a matter of fact. He's been there before. One too many times. How does one deal with that which they can't actually become aware of, really? Well, and this may not get a lot of approval from people, and for that I'm not apologetic at all. If you want that trauma to be gone as quick as possible, and you are healthy, and you're not at risk for an instant heart attack or anything else like that, you're in pretty good shape. My best suggestion would be to suggest considering going on a DMT or ayahuasca trip. The reason being is DMT disconnects the memory from the nervous system. There's no longer that memory connection anymore. And that severance of that connection is instantaneous. Within 1 day of having the experience, you will realize that there has been a fundamental change in your nervous system. Now, we're going to get into this a little deeper. Interestingly enough, a lot of people would say, well, isn't that sort of like drugging yourself out? Okay, on one level. But not only are we talking about a naturally occurring substance, but we're talking about a substance that your own pineal gland produces in certain circumstances. There is another way. If you're not interested in the DMT experience, there's another way you can do this, and that is to get the pineal gland to start producing the DMT in quantity over a period of time. Now, there is something known as a darkness retreat. And I personally have gone on a 2-week darkness retreat in Thailand, And it was at Mantak Chia's darkness retreat. It's done in a cave system. And we're not talking about a little bit dark or kind of dark. We're talking about the absence of all light exterior to oneself for 2 full weeks. The first day is an orientation. It's shadows. There's dim lights around. You learn the layout a little bit. You learn how to eat in the dark. You learn how to do things you need to do in the dark. And then you spend 2 weeks with not a single source of light. Now, what happens around the 5th day? And incidentally, yeah, you do begin to see your own neurons firing because there's no light outside of yourself. You really do. You close your eyes and you watch your own neurons firing, and it's magical. It's like being inside the universe all of a sudden. But interestingly enough, what happens right around the beginning of the 5th day, somewhere between the 4th and 5th day, is your pineal gland begins to produce a chemical that is very much exactly the same thing. As a matter of fact, it is a type of DMT. It has DMT in the name of it. I believe it's something 50 DMT. But the bottom line is your pineal gland begins to produce this naturally, and it has the same effect. It severs cellular memory at the level of your nervous system, so that there is no more residual trauma attached to the energetic field of the body. Now, there's another type of trauma. Okay, so before we go any further, when it comes to cellular memory, to be perfectly frank with you, I know of only one other way that has met with reasonable success, and that is a very well-trained TCM practitioner, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, one who is very well trained in acupuncture. And you may be doing acupuncture sessions once or twice a week for 6 months or more before those meridians can be rebalanced and that cellular memory disconnected from the nervous system. So if you're tired of suffering and you want the quickest way out, you have the DMT experience. And then, of course, you have the ability to do a darkness long term. It has to be 2 weeks. And that disconnects the same way. Carol has a question. What is Carol's question?
She doesn't know what does DMT stand for.
It's a long chemical name, dimethyltoluene or something similar to that. But what we're really talking about is the ayahuasca experience.
Yeah, that's not like LSD.
Right? No, it's not like LSD. You know, LSD does not disconnect the cellular memory. In my mind, there's a profound difference between, someone who decides to do drugs and someone who approaches a very age-old ceremonial, traditional experience that offers one a pathway towards healing that they otherwise may not reach. And I do not judge the experience as good or bad. I had the experience myself, and I thought it was incredible and beneficial. With all things, it was a gateway. Gateways aren't like doors. They're not meant to be gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I haven't really had the need to do that again. So you can consider those sort of things. So besides the DMT, the darkness retreat, and then of course a little bit longer term acupuncture by a good TCM practitioner who understands chi energy very well and energy flow. You can't get rid of cellular memory from the level of the mind. And a lot of people would lead you to believe that, oh, my mind is so powerful, or it should be so powerful. I mean, it's creating my reality and everything, that I should be able to get rid of this cellular memory. You can have profound impact on the body structure from a mental level. But at its core energy level, your mind's got nothing on what your body's got going on. The total number of functions that it handles blissfully unaware, you have no idea. The intelligence that it possesses to keep the mind you have alive, in the sense that you believe it is part of this physical structure. That's the only way to truly get rid of it. You can certainly have an impact on physical trauma from the mental level. I'm not saying you can't. Meditation helps. All different techniques to help with the mind are very beneficial. But at the end of the day, the trauma will never, ever, ever be released from that cellular memory and nervous system, unless one of those three approaches are engaged. And I know of no other really dependable approach. Now, let's turn to the perhaps larger one in a lot of ways. And that is the mental trauma that we perpetrate upon ourselves from our point of view. So, when we look outside of ourselves all the time and we see that there's an abusive person in our life who's abusing us, it's not what the person is saying that causes us any harm. I mean, we'd love to believe that, and we'd love to blame them and hold them responsible and everything else. But if we're willing to step back for a second and realize that they are one of life's teachers too, we're going to find that the source of trauma mentally is ourselves. It lies in our concepts, it lies in our points of view, it lies in the shoulds and should nots, and would nots, and must nots. It lies in the societal conditioning that we've taken on. It lays in all of these things. Mental trauma, gratefully, totally grateful for this, is totally owned by the individual experiencing it, and therefore it can be dealt with, and you are the one with the power to deal with it. It starts, of course, with changing that point of view. Now, a lot of times this mental trauma has gone deep. And we talk about this before. We talk about these originating thoughts. The thoughts in the subconsciousness. And that comes from repeating those same patterns with ourselves over and over and over again. And I'm not saying they're not going to be easy to break out of, but they can be broken out of. There's a number of ways to break out of them successfully, but the very best way, the easiest, quickest way, and this is the reason why I talk about these things, okay? I have infinite compassion for you, pure compassion. Pure compassion says, I'm not going to enable you to continue what you're doing in any sort of way, and I want to give you a doorway that'll lead you to your perception of being healed as quick as possible. Why? Because ultimately, you're perfect. You just have to see it. So, the quickest doorway, the quickest path to healing that mental trauma is to understand that it was never personal. If you were to pick yourself out and put yourself down out of the situation and pick up someone else who looked a lot like you and sounded a lot like you and said the same things that you said and drop them into the picture, you're going to notice that the same sort of stuff happens to them. But what if you choose to think about it differently? What if you choose to understand that every experience you're having is giving you an opportunity to express who you are and who you wish to be? to express the innermost you. And yes, you can, been there, done that. Sexually abused by my own father since the age of 3, right through the age of 5 and past. Father ended up dead. Mother ended up committing suicide. All my family members dead. Boo hoo hoo. Whine, whine, whine. Cry, cry, cry. Whole universe is out to get me. I could choose to perceive my own life that way in those early years. It doesn't matter what's happened to you. You're not living then, you're living now. And as long as you keep dredging up then and yanking it here with you, you're going to keep reliving that mental trauma that you have created over and over and over again. Now, here's the problem when that mental trauma has been long-term. Egoically, you've taken much of that on as who you are. It's part of your identity and it's insidious in ways you didn't even think. It's crawled in and woven its way into your own identity. And now part of you is a little scared too. And that's a really difficult part to see. The part of you that's a little scared is wondering what you are going to be if you no longer associate yourself mentally with that point of view. What if you're not willing to see that abuse as being a bad thing? What if you're just willing to accept that it occurred and you were being offered a choice on how you were going to choose to interpret it? How does that change that perception of trauma? Because that trauma, that sort of trauma that goes on at the level of the mind is perceptual. So, yes, my dad did those things to me physically. That's physical trauma. What I choose to think about those things and what he did can or will not create mental trauma, depending on my point of view. Your point of view is the quickest way through that door of freedom of your mental trauma. But you're going to have to get by yourself. You're going to have to trust enough to take that leap into the darkness of not knowing who you're going to be without you carrying around all those perceptions anymore. Now, where does this lead to? Well, it leads to forming a daily healing practice for ourselves. And that healing practice, in my point of view, is to not ever sit there and say that there's something broken with me. Because indeed, in God's perfection, everything is exactly as it needs to be right now. It's literally quite perfect. So the fact that I have disintegrating vertebrae and a pinched nerve and, need double fusion back surgery, I'm not broken. The vehicle is malfunctioning a little bit. I have an axle that needs some repair. But I am not willing to entertain at that mind level the concept that there's something broken in my being. So when we're talking about healing, we're really talking about the healing of our perception. The healing of our perception of ourselves as beings. The understanding that no matter what's going on in the body, no matter what sort of cellular trauma and nervous system trauma it may be holding on to, we're not that body. It is a vessel, a vehicle that we use. I don't know what teeth would equate to on a car. I don't know. I lost my headlights and windshield wipers. Blew a fan belt. I don't know. The point is your point of view is going to be your healing practice, and that's what I want to get to. I want to reiterate every day with you that when you wake up in the morning, you're offered an opportunity to set the tone for your entire day. I woke up this morning and my back was aching before I woke up, apparently, because it was aching when I woke up. And I was grateful for the ache. I remember saying to myself, oh, yeah, it's still there. I'm still here. Why? Because I can feel my back. And in those things, you're not disconnecting from yourself. You're getting the idea that there's something wrong out of the way. And that is one of the most healing things you can do for yourself. So if you're feeling that your body is not responding properly or not putting up with the things that you think it should be doing right now, or whatever the case may be, instead of beating upon yourself, you need to go to that mirror every single day and you need to look at your whole body and you need to say, I'm so grateful for the vehicle that I was given to scurry to and fro on this planet in my journey here. I'm so grateful that you've lasted as long as you have. It's so wonderful and magical the way you can heal yourself, the way you can regenerate when necessary. The magic of what we would call a physical human being, with trillions of parts that have to work together, makes the space shuttle a 3-year-old's Lego set in comparison. You need to do that every day with yourself. You need to approach whatever you have left. The warranty's expired on my vehicle. I know that. Its days are numbered. Pretty soon, the last of the insurance is going to run out and it will become uninsurable. I probably won't even get plates for it anymore. Really, I got one attached to my butt right now. The point is in your healing practice, gratitude, humor with the physical form you occupy, that you generate. And when it comes to your mental self, entertaining no thought which does not feel good to you. And I promise you that is not about glossing everything over. It's not about not responding effectively. It's not about not standing up for yourself. It's about learning how to look at things from the eyes of loving yourself. Which means when the person starts yelling and screaming at you because you accidentally bumped into them, you instantly realize that you were simply the straw that broke the camel's back. There was already a huge weight there. You were only the straw. You don't have to take on a lot about it. You can apologize for the bump and not take on anything else. And in that state of being, you will also be offered an opportunity to serve that person. To be able to look at them and say, I'm really sorry I bumped into you, but what's going on? I can tell you there's a lot going on with you, and I've got a few minutes. Maybe we can talk. When you free yourself from your own opinion, when you're willing to hold no thought that doesn't feel good, that doesn't mean you start lying to yourself. It means you start telling yourself the honest truth. I'm not responsible for another's thoughts. I'm responsible for my thoughts. I'm not responsible for another's judgment of me. I'm responsible for the way I hold myself accountable. This is your power. This is your strength. This is the true healing. Returning to the core of your own being. All the power is there. The other thing, of course, is engaging in meditation. You know, we don't meditate because there's a purpose to it. We meditate to get to know ourselves more deeply, over and over and over again. Much love to you this evening. I hope this video is a little bit helpful. I hope it's very helpful. I do want to point out that there is great progress being made in the area of using certain psychedelics for restorative counseling purposes. And I would urge you to open your mind to such things, do your own due diligence and research. And if you're having real problems with cellular trauma, with physical trauma, those 3 things I mentioned may be of benefit to you. Again, all my love, namaste. Have a beautiful Friday night. We'll catch up again very soon.